All right. We are live. Hello and welcome, Just Alive family. So, of course, you're catching an episode of Just Alive TV. I am your host, Melissa Krechler. I am also an identity coach and spiritual teacher. And today, my guest is Melanie Smith, and we're going to be talking about creating relationships your way. So, love your way. So, I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Melissa. My name is Melanie Smith. I was an elementary school teacher and a literacy specialist for 23 years and kind of identified with that. Now I have a skincare business with Rodan and Fields. And one of the things that I talked to Melissa about that I thought would be very interesting for her audience is some of the journey that I've been on with how I decided that I didn't want to be a mom. And that I wanted to have a relationship that worked for me by having a partner instead of a live-in spouse. And some of the things that kind of led me there were the love languages, the Myers-Briggs personality types, the enneagram. And so we're going to talk about some of those things today. If you are interested in those things, I think you should stick around.
Absolutely. And for anybody watching, if you want to get in on the action, and you want to have a chat with us or you want to comment, please absolutely share the video, tap the like, make sure you get all notifications on the page. And again, whether you're watching, listening, reading, it doesn't matter. You are always welcome on Just Alive TV. Pop in the comments, say hi, send us a message. And at the end of this, I'll tell you where you can reach out to us personally. So now that we're ready to get started, love languages. So when we talked about this episode and creating love your way, I was really excited because my own relationship wouldn't fit into, don't get me wrong, I'm married, I have kids, I have the animals, I don't have the white picket fence, it's brown, but at the same time, some people look at my relationship and they're like, really? Like, it doesn't, like, there's things about my own relationship that people question, and it works for us though. And that's, I think, what you and I are trying to do on this episode is just help people understand that your relationship needs to work for you, right? So let's jump in. 5 love languages. What are they? Do you wanna tell people what they are, or?
Sure, I would love to do that. I am still trying to get that link posted. I'm going to just do that really quick there we go.
Not a problem. I'm doing it too.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, I kept running into a snag and I couldn't figure out what's happening. So the love languages are something that I looked at when I was in my first marriage. I was with my first husband for 23 years, and we met when I was only 18. I didn't really know at that point in my life what I needed, right? And so I started learning that the one that spoke to me the most is words of affirmation. And I've since learned that that's so true for, like, so many of my friends are words of affirmation people. You know that somebody loves words of affirmation if they light up when you give them a compliment or tell them that they're doing something really well. And my first husband tended to be really critical. So to me, if he wasn't using words of affirmation, it almost felt like abuse, right? And I just had a feeling of like not being good enough all the time. And that was very hard for me. And the second love language for me was physical touch. So if you're with someone who really doesn't like to be touched for whatever reason, that's a difficult one for people as well. My third one was quality time. So I'm like this with my friends. I feel like with my friends, this is the one that really shows up. Like, I will be happy to just sit with you and talk. We don't have to be, doing anything special. And then the two that are the lowest for me are gifts and acts of service. So a lot of times men are acts of service oriented is kind of what I found. And they show their love by doing things, like going to work, bringing home like the paycheck for the family. Oftentimes is kind of, they feel like that is how they're showing love. And those two really don't mean very much to me at all. I really don't like getting gifts, which, you know, again, it's one of those things where you have to set boundaries with people and even friends and say like, hey, look, I know you like always get me a gift for my birthday. I don't really want gifts, you know, like, can we just go hang out together? And it really does help you to just be more open about the things that you need. And I was so super happy to learn about it. It helped me so much. And there is a test, like it's a free test. You just go online and find your love language.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually post that once we're done. I'll find that link and we'll post it in the comments. My own husband is acts of service. And I'm not going to lie, and I'll try to word this as nicely as possible. My husband is an a-hole. I love him dearly. But to the outside world, he seems that way, right? And people get it confused. And I'm very much physical touch. Physical touch for me is my main love language. So for him and I, it was almost clashing. And there's points in our marriage where I'm like, I'm not getting that physical touch. And we have that conversation about it. I've seen so many relationships who don't understand the 5 love languages, and it causes so much issue in the relationship. My husband's way of showing me that he loves me is making sure that my car is taken care of, helping me clean, making sure that, you know, my needs are met. If I get hurt or I'm upset, he gets angry, right? So he shows me in ways that he's comfortable showing me. Now, if I need affection, right, and physical touch, I just turn around and I say, listen, like, I'm feeling a little bit low. This would really help me. Let's snuggle and watch a movie, or, you know, go do something together that involves, you know, hugging or making out or whatever, but whatever it may be, right? So that was a really big one in my own marriage, was understanding his needs and my needs.
There is this idea. There's this idea, I feel like, in society that if someone loves us, we shouldn't have to tell them what we need. And that couldn't be more from the truth. You have to communicate that. And so, you know, my current husband is very good about like asking, you know, what can I do for you? Because he's also acts of service, right? So he knows that he's going to fail at showing me love, because that's not like, I don't feel loved by acts of service. Although I do like it when he makes me dinner. So he'll say to me, what do you need from me? So like, you know, I require very little, and, you know, just text me and tell me good morning, beautiful, you know, like, because we don't live together, and that will be another topic that we'll get to. You know, notes, you know, leave a little message on Alexa, you know, Alexa, tell Melanie at such and such a time that she's the most beautiful woman in the world, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, we have to communicate what we need. And I think that that's where, and I think that, you know, there's been a little bit of an issue with love languages in recent times where people feel like it's sort of toxic and it's a way to like tell the other person, you don't give me what I need, but maybe that person's not right for you. Like, I feel like this is a good conversation to have and make sure that you and your partner can work with the things that work for both of you before you join into a relationship. And if you're already in the relationship, then there's got to be some ways to, you know, compromise or find some common ground with the love languages. Oftentimes you'll have one in common. Like my ex-husband and I had quality time, we had that pretty common in the scores. So like when we were spending quality time together, I think that kept us going for 23 years, you know, so we're aware of that.
Yeah. I think you made a really good point. And I always teach my own clients, because I do some relationship coaching, is that there's 3 parts to every relationship. There's you, there's your partner, and then there's the relationship itself. And it's like being in a marriage and having a joint checking account, right? You each have to put into that account in order to make the relationship work. And if you don't have that conversation about what you need, that causes a lot of struggle. So somebody will be in the honeymoon state of a marriage, and then all of a sudden it's be like, you don't do this and you don't do that. And then it becomes an accusation rather than saying, you know what, this is something that I need. And I'd really appreciate it if you, made a little bit of effort to do this. You're not putting the blame on that other person. You're expressing your need and giving them the option to do the same. And relationships, a lot of them I find fail because there isn't that communication, right? So that's big, and that goes hand in hand with setting boundaries, which was one of our next topics, is not everybody is going to want or need the same things in a relationship. And there's going to be things that you are absolutely not comfortable with in a relationship. So for you mentioned at the beginning of the video that you didn't want children, and some people don't. Now, if that's a make or break in a relationship, then that speaks on that person not being the person that you should be with, right? If they can't accept or acknowledge that, because everybody's entitled to those boundaries. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in talking to people who are a generation older than I am about the fact that I didn't want children, they would say to me things like, well, I didn't even know that it was an option to not have children. Like, it was a societal expectation that, you're going to get married and you're going to have kids. And we didn't. So I spent 8 years deciding if I wanted to have children or not. I read every book that I could read. My favorite one was called Two is Enough. And it was coincidentally written by someone who lived in the same town as me that I was living in. I did not know this person and never have met them, but I found that a really unusual coincidence. And she interviewed all these people and learned that they really didn't regret not having children later in life. And I haven't. I mean, I'm going to be 46 this year, and I haven't ever once thought, oh, I really should have had kids. I used to tell people I don't want kids, but I would be okay with grandchildren. And they would laugh, right? And say things like, well, I don't think it works that way. Well, now, I do have an opportunity for that because I'm married to a man with older children, and that very well may happen for them. And I may have an opportunity to be a grandma.
Yeah. So, which is different, right? Grandparents can give the kids back.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I get to play with you, and then you get to go home. I love you, but you get to go home, right? And I think in your case, being in a partnership, right? It's that's already what you're kind of living, right? Where it's like, okay, I need my space, and that's a boundary you put into place, right? And I love that boundary.
And I think the reason why I knew that children weren't for me is there were a couple of reasons. Being an elementary school teacher, I was with them all day long. I didn't want to see them at my house. And then the other thing was I realized that my alone time was so sacred for me. And it wasn't just sacred, it was necessary for me to live. And if I didn't have alone time to recuperate and recover, I would just fall apart. Like, I would get really angry. I would get even depressed. I would lash out. And it was because I wasn't having that period of calm that I personally need to just regroup after being with children or being with a lot of people in an atmosphere like a school. So for me, not having children gave me the opportunity to have that alone time, because obviously when you're married to somebody, they can give you that because they're an adult. But I took it a step further in my second marriage because what I really realized was that I didn't like it that much when my husband was home. I found myself being very resentful that they were in my space or constantly asking me to go get things for them or asking me a question. I'm a person who likes to think about things, get really, really deep into thought, or really, really concentrate on a project. And you can't do that if you're constantly being interrupted. So knowing that about myself, it just lent itself to having a partnership. So when I met my current husband, he kept, kind of teasing me like, oh, you're anti-marriage. I know you're never going to want to get married. And I started to think about it, and I said, really, I don't have any issues with marriage. Like, I think marriage is great, and I want the stability of a life partner. I just want to have my own house. So he really didn't hesitate and said, okay, we can make that work. So I bought a house in, like January of 2020, and then we got married and he already had his house and his children are there with him. And then we got married in June of 2021 and continued living in our separate residences. And I've had to, wrestle with societal expectations. There are a lot of people who think that it's really, really weird. And it's not for me. For me, it's and then there are people who you see it in their eyes, right? They'll say things like, how did you do that? What did you say? Tell me a little bit more about how that works, and they really want to do it. So it's actually become a national movement. People are writing documentaries about it. I'm in a group on Facebook called Apartners, and it's for people who are considering doing this or who do it already. And the majority of the people live between 1 and 25 miles apart, because we recently just did a little poll in there. And my husband and I are 4 minutes apart. Like, you go out to the main road, you go down the road, you go to the very next stoplight, and that's his neighborhood, so we have a very, we can get back and forth to each other's homes. And what I love about it, Melissa, is that whenever we see each other, it's special every single time.
It's almost like it's brand new.
We might go for 2 or 3 days without seeing each other. And then whenever it's like that 3rd or 4th day and we're like getting ready to get together, it feels like the 3rd date. Like, you don't experience that when you're living in someone's house every day and you walk in and they're your roommate and you're like, hi, what's for dinner? Like, and you're just having these, and that's another thing. I don't like small talk. When you live with someone, you resort to a lot of small talk because you're trying to have these niceties. Every time I'm with my husband, we talk about in-depth, important things. And that's like, so it's filling my bucket every time we get together because of that too.
Yeah. And you know what? I commend you on that, because to do something that society expects you not to do, that's hard, right? But at the same time, it's so rewarding to create a life that fulfills you and your partner. So I'm married. I live with my husband. We live with our kids and, everything else. And so I've got that stereotypical life, right? And there's days where my husband and I are at each other's throats because we're just irritated with each other. We need a break. We need some time apart or what have you. And the thought of a partnering is quite interesting. Now, I wouldn't want that because I like sleeping next to every night, and I, don't always need that space. But it is interesting that just so many people think that it has to be one way, and it really, really doesn't.
Yeah.
And I love that you're being an advocate of that.
I try to be. I just think that it's a solution for people like me who are just a little different in that they need a lot of alone time. I actually thought that something was wrong with me. And around age 40, I went to a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with Aspberger's syndrome. And she put me on all kinds of anti-anxiety medication. And the thing that was causing it for me, or that made her think that I was on the spectrum, is that I would ruminate or fixate on something and not be able to let go of it. And it would just circle around and around and around in my mind. So she felt like that was like the proper diagnosis. I read every book I could on women with Asperger's. And you know what? 95% of it felt like me. The part that didn't feel like me when I would get together with friends and I would be social, I could be extroverted. I could look people in the eye. I could carry a conversation. And that was the part that didn't really fit with the Asperger's diagnosis. So I kind of went a different route and I started looking at what is the INFJ personality type like, and which is what I am in the Myers-Briggs personality type. INFJs are the most extroverted introverts. They are the most likely to get depleted by external stimuli. They're highly sensitive. Noises bother them. Lights bother them. And I should say me. Lights bother me. Noises bother me. So those were some of the other things that kind of seemed a little bit autistic. Fabrics, if something is rough or feels weird, like that bothers me. That is all INFJ. Like all of those things are INFJ. So I was like, okay, I don't think I have Asperger's. I think I'm just an INFJ and I'm perfectly normal. And this is who I am. And I'm just going to start embracing it and stop feeling like I'm some kind of a freak, for lack of a better word, because my ex-husband made me feel like that way. So yeah. It was a big heavy journey, but like I finally got to a place where I feel really good about what's happening with myself.
So in loving your way, right? And for women who are, or even men who don't want the stereotypic married with a white picket fence, 2 kids and a dog, where do you think they would start with that? Right? I would suggest them starting with looking in and saying, okay, if that's not what I want, what do I want? Right? And allow yourself to think outside of the box rather than society's box, right? That's because what it is. It's society's box that you're trapped in. So start thinking outside the box and really ask yourself, what do I want? And it takes time.
It really does. I think if I could go back and tell my younger self what to do, I would probably say, okay, Melanie, you've been in relationships. You've had relationships with family members. You've had relationships with boys. You've had relationships with friends. Inside of those relationships, what felt good and right and whole, and what felt like it was breaking you apart and it wasn't sitting well with your soul. And if you can differentiate those things, you're on the right path, because then you'll start to see, like, because sometimes for people, it's hard to take a personality test when they're 18 or 19 or even 30 and know, is this personality test right? Is it even telling me the right thing? But one thing I've learned is that you know the truth by the way that it feels. And your gut will always tell you the right thing. And I think that's another societal issue, is there are people who say, oh, let's not go with feelings, let's go with facts, right? Well, facts aren't always truths. There's a lot of truth in going with your gut and the way that you feel about something. When I was 23 years old and I was getting ready to walk down the aisle, my gut was telling me that this isn't the right thing for you. And I didn't listen, because I wanted to walk down the aisle. I wanted to have a big wedding dress and the big wedding and all the people at my wedding. And then I kind of, suffered inside of that choice for a very long time. And there were wonderful happy moments. I made it work and did lots of wonderful things. But from that, I knew that it wasn't right. Do you know what I mean? So I think people, you get a feeling, and so here's what I just had this conversation with my mom yesterday. God is inside of us, right? So a lot of people think God is like this outside external being in the universe, but it's what's inside of us. And the obedience that we need to show is listening to that voice that's saying, oh, go call Kristen and see how she is today. That's the voice of God. Go over and check on your neighbor and make sure everything's okay. Go see if that crying child needs help. There's always this voice that if we just do what the voice says, pick up the phone and call that number for that college class you want to enroll in. When we hear that voice, if we just act on it and don't let doubt creep in, we will always be on the path that we need to be on. Like, I just feel like our intuition is very strong, and developing that intuition is something that would help a lot of people in their lives.
Yeah. Your intuition is your connection to your inner self, right? And your inner self has all the answers you could possibly need because it's unique to who you are, right?
Yeah.
It's now when you say that it's not always feeling, so I wanted to touch on that. Because I don't, how do I word this? When it depends on the feeling. If you're talking about the feeling in an intuitive way, then absolutely go with your intuition. But if you're talking about a feeling of fear or a feeling of overwhelm or a feeling of, maybe this isn't right, or maybe I should do this, or there are a lot of situations that shouldn't be dealt with through emotion, right? Feeling something, yes. Emotion, no. Because you can do stuff through emotion and then have it completely the wrong thing, right? Like, so you think about somebody who's at home and stressed out about their relationship, right? And they keep replaying it in their head, and they're so emotionally invested in the outcome of whether their relationship is going to last or whether it's not going to last or whatever, that they're not logically thinking that they have any options, right? They're so consumed by the emotion that they're not feeling what their gut is telling them. They're not feeling like they have the capacity to work it out because they're so emotionally overwhelmed with the emotional outcome, right? So there is a catch-22 in that. And I definitely, that's what I wanted to explain, because there's a difference between your feelings and your emotions. Your emotions are directly linked.
How could someone who's listening to this kind of know, like, when to listen and when to not? You know what I mean? Like, what would be good advice for, like, how do I know that it's my gut versus doubt or fear?
So that comes down to an identity thing. When so somebody walking down the aisle, right? Your desire to walk down the aisle wasn't necessarily for your benefit, but what everybody else assumed that you should do, right? The getting married, the White House, the white picket fence, all of that, right? Your intuition, right? Your identity was telling you, no, this is not what I want.
That's
right?
So powerful. So, because it really speaks to kind of like our whole conversation today of not going with what you think you should do, right? Going with what is right for you. Yeah, 100. I find that anytime I'm trying to make a decision and I kind of already know the answer, but I want to get someone else's opinion. If they tell me an opinion and it's against my intuition, I will really struggle then, right? Like, I'll kind of be like, well, this is what this person thought, but this is what I think. Now I don't know. Am I wrong? Whereas if I wouldn't, what?
Are you a people pleaser?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's why.
Yeah. So like if what I'm learning now in my older age, because I'm starting to not be a people pleaser, is that if I just don't ask anyone else's opinion and I just do what feels right to me, it almost always makes the whole situation unfold perfectly. And it just I don't know. For me, it just makes me realize that I shouldn't ask people's opinions.
Yeah. The other, so yes and no, right? Society has made it so that, and this hence my cancel culture video that I did last week. Society has told us that life needs to be a certain way, that as women we need to be a certain way, relationships a certain way. I disagree. but not a lot of people embrace the disagreement. So if somebody comes up to me and tells me that they disagree with my show, absolutely, that's awesome for you. And I'm glad that you felt confident enough to voice your opinion. But your opinion doesn't invalidate my belief, right? So it's one, it comes down to confidence. Well, I guess number one would be knowing who you are, right? And knowing what your beliefs are, right? If somebody gives you their opinion, they're not necessarily, and this is where society has gotten it wrong, they're not automatically attacking your opinion or invalidating your opinion. They're just stating their own, right? Mm-hmm. And I think society as a whole needs to be a lot more comfortable with hearing other people's opinions and being able to say, hey, you know what? I disagree with that. And here's why, but that's totally okay because it's right for you. And right. That's what matters. Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go around telling women who want children that they're wrong to want children. Like, that's, basically what cancel culture is doing.
But it's done to you.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's where it is, right? It's people don't understand how to communicate anymore. Right. And that's not okay. It's mm-hmm. absolutely not okay. So for my own relationship, people will see, like, our close friends, and we've had this happen before. My husband and I are physically violent with each other. Now, it's not out of anger. It's never out of anger. If either one of us hit each other out of anger, that would be an absolute boundary crossing. But every so often, I'll give him a Charlie horse, or he'll squeeze me really tight or whatever, like I'll punch him in the leg or whatever, right? But for us, that's okay, because that's what we want. We like to play fight, right? You think about, I grew up with 3 older brothers, and the WWE was really big when I was growing up. So I would wrestle with my brothers, right? And I'd punch them and kick them and put them in headlocks. And I grew up with that, right? So it created in me almost like a vent, right? An outlet, if you will, mm-hmm. for excess energy. And so my husband and I flew around like that. But we've actually had people witness it, and it's like they stand back and they're like, whoa. And the not necessarily the judgment, but the belief in them is questioned at that point. Like, is that okay? Like, do I say something? And it's like, no, we're fine. Like, we're good to go. Don't worry about it. People don't have those conversations, right? People are afraid to say, my relationship is submissive and dominant. My relationship is, people aren't having conversations expressing that their relationship is different, but it's okay for them, right? Mm-hmm. Your relationship is different than society's norm. You've just announced, hey, my relationship is different. We live in separate houses. And that's awesome because it works for you. It makes you happy. And that's what humanity should be. We should be focused on what makes us happy. And what better way to do that than in our romantic relationships? How high is the divorce rate? Because people don't understand that a relationship has those 3 parts. What I need, what you need, what we need together.
Yeah.
Right? And to be conscious of giving your partner what they need, as long as it works for you too.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's definitely a passion of mine.
I think we can get there just by simply agreeing that we're not all the same people.
No.
We're just not.
Oh. And we shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. Right?
I think I was thinking about how when you were talking about growing up in your family, like if I would have been in that family, I would have been like probably scared, and I think about people in a family where like, for example, everybody likes playing games and it's very boisterous, but like, that child likes to sit and read a book in the corner. And sometimes I think even as a child in your own family, you can feel out of place. Like, who are these people? Like, I don't have anything in common with them. And I think as a child, and I'm speaking to like younger people now, but I think even as a child, when you start to feel that feeling, and probably I'm in tune with that because being an elementary school teacher all those years, when you start to feel that feeling, you're a little farther along than most people are in knowing who you are. And instead of feeling like something's wrong with you, start finding people who are like you and building your little tribe. And
communicating.
Yeah, and not, people sometimes make fun of their own kids, or like I've seen that, like or just it really starts with the family.
Yeah. If you think about it, and this is one of the things I love to teach because nobody truly understands this. Children know who they are, right? When you're a kid, you are building your identity. I'm not saying you're born like automatically with every knowledge you possibly get. That's not how it works. But children, as they're growing up, will create their identity based on everything around them, what they witness, what they're taught, what environment they grow up in. They do make the choice of what to believe and what not to believe. But at the same time, once you become an adult, right? So let's say coping, right? Or relationships, because we're talking about relationships, right? My biggest fear in my relationship is my husband passing away. And the reason that is because I've seen all the men in my family pass away before the women, every single one, right? So it's like now that fear has been ingrained in me because of what I've witnessed, right? I've seen loving relationships. I've seen not loving relationships. So I grew up planning what my relationship would look like. Now you've got women our age who grew up with Disney princesses and Prince Charming and all of this. You had to, pick Prince Charming and he was tall, dark, and handsome. And then, so we create this idea of who we're supposed to be with. And then that turns, Mr. Tall, Dark, and handsome turns out to be a cheating, abusive, or a cheater, right? We have these ideals of what are like, and I know I say we don't talk about religion, but we're not, but you have some religious factors that will tell you can only marry somebody within that religion. But maybe you find somebody who's not of that religion and you're like, automatically, you're like, no, you're not my religion. You don't know if that person would convert. You don't know if that person is the one who would give you everything you could possibly dream of, because now you've got this belief that you have to have it this way, right? And relationships fail that way all the time.
The divorce rate is just so high, and I can see why. I think it's really just people not advocating for, not knowing who they are, first of all, and not advocating for what they need inside of their relationship.
Yeah. Being an identity coach, yeah, 100%. Everything in your life, and I say this all the time, 85% of your life and the things that happen in your life and the situations that you find yourself in and the emotions, everything, 85% of your life is directly based on your own choices, your own beliefs. You have 15% that's not, and that 15% is the percentage of what other people choose to do. You can't control what other people do. So if somebody victimizes you or somebody calls you a name, you can't control that. You can control what happens after, but you're in control of everything. If you're in a relationship that you don't want to be in, you have that control. You created that relationship. And that sounds judgmental. And trust me, I love all of you watching. I am not being judgmental. I'm just trying to get you to understand that your beliefs and the beliefs that you've created, if you don't feel worthy enough, you're going to be in a relationship where you're not treated like you're worth it. If you don't feel like you're entitled to somebody who's going to love you for the rest of your life and make you feel safe, you're not going to be in a relationship that makes you feel safe. Now, my husband and I absolutely have our issues because I can't control him and I don't want to control him. And there's things about him that I don't like and vice versa. But I feel safe. I'm not worried about being cheated on. I'm not worried that he's going to leave me. I have no fear in my relationship because I knew what I wanted and I created that. I actually wrote a book on that. I have a book out about how I did that, right? Creating relationships come down to knowing who you are, knowing what you want, removing societal's beliefs on what you have to have, and creating something with a partner who gives you what you need to feel. That's the key. And too many people don't realize that.
And one of the things I think that's important to think about too is that one person can't give you everything you need. So like that's where you have to give yourself some of these things, right? So like if you think about back to the love languages again, I've had a lot of conversations with girlfriends and they really like this tip. So I'll just share it with everybody here.
Absolutely.
When, I know that I love words of affirmation. And so I can give words of affirmation to myself. And that might sound weird to people. And trust me, it is weird at first. And there's a book, if you don't know where to get started, by Louisa Hay called Mirror Work, where she like looks in the mirror and like says, nice things to herself. That was kind of where I got the idea. And it does feel weird at first, but I have, you can wake up with and do positive affirmations. You can find those on YouTube or like meditation timers. You can, pretend that your pets are saying nice things to you. Like I have a little cat who makes these little noises. And when he makes one of those little noises, I just look at him and say, my hair does look really good today. And it's like, I'm basically giving that affirmation to myself, but pretending that he said it, which makes it a little less weird, if he walks in and makes his little noise and my back is to him, I'll be like, my butt does look good in these jeans. Like just silly things like that. But true. Those words matter and I'm hearing them and I'm not relying on another person to give them to me. And it builds my confidence. And I go out into the world feeling okay. And I don't have fear and I don't worry, if something were to happen to my husband, I'm going to be okay because I give myself everything that I emotionally need.
But it is still nice to have somebody give it to you as well, right? And that was my point with it, is just making sure that that person is giving you what you need because you've communicated that with them. Your husband does the words of affirmation because you've asked him to do that or communicated with that, and he chose to do it, right? So it's definitely, for me, with being physical, right? Physical touch. Instead of my husband physically touching me, I'll go and I'll physically touch him. Or I have 5 cats. Excuse me. I have 5 cats. I will go grab one of my cats and I will just snuggle them and just love them. And they just snuggle with me and it makes me feel better. I'll go grab one of my kids and force them to hug me for 5 minutes, like there are ways to get any, if it's gifts or just plain gifts, right? Order flowers and have them delivered. Go to Amazon, buy yourself a present, have it delivered to your house. You know what I mean? Like there are ways around that, even giving yourself a nice, beautiful hot bath, right? That's a gift all by yourself.
And if you're acts of service, have service people do things for you, clean your house, like whatever it is, that cook you a meal.
Or do it for other people.
That's
the thing. Your love language doesn't have to come from yourself or from other people. You can actually give what your love language is, and it's just as powerful as receiving it.
100%.
Yeah. Because for words of affirmation, right? If you tell your husband something and he's like, aw, right? Or you see the look on his face, or even just how it builds him up. When I tell my husband, I really appreciate everything that you do for me, right? And it changes his demeanor in that moment, right? Where it's like, I'm appreciated, right?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the things I've learned about acts of service, people, like husbands in particular, sometimes you don't even have to do the thing. You just offer to do the thing. And that means enough to them, right? Like he tells me all the time, like, it meant so much to me that you offered to like cut those onions for dinner. Thank you. You know, like, or it meant so much that you took care of that phone call that with that issue that we had with, you know, whatever. So sometimes you can just offer, you know, and it means just as much.
Yeah. No, for sure. My husband's face when he comes home and doesn't have to do anything because I've done it all is priceless. That doesn't happen all the time because I'm a busy CEO, but when it does happen, it changes, right? So yeah, for sure. It's communication, boundaries, love languages, knowing who you are, your own identity, knowing, you know, who your partner is, and putting that, realizing that a relationship is 3 parts really is the key to creating a love your way. Right? And that's the whole point of this video, right? Is creating a love your way, not based on everybody else. So what do you think? Any tips and tricks, or any recap? Because we're getting close there. So I figure, is there anything that you want to reiterate or recap, or anything else that you'd like to touch on before we go?
I think just if you're not sure where to start, the easiest thing is, like I said earlier, if you think about relationships that you've been in with your family members, with your parents, with your friends, and with boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives. Think about the things that made you feel good and the things that didn't feel good. And that can just really kind of narrow it down for you with the things that you need, and then start advocating for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's huge. Relationships take work, and they take a lot of understanding and communication. And for anybody watching, reach out to myself, reach out to Melanie if you have any questions, if you want more information on the topic, or just want to connect. Absolutely reach out. You can do so through the website www.justalivetv.com. All of our information is on there, all of our links where you can connect with us, watch the replay, listen to the replay. All of that is on the website, and 99% of the social media links, all Just Alive TV. Yeah, that's really it. Thank you so much for joining me, Melanie. I really appreciate it. I think this was definitely a needed conversation about relationships, and getting people to understand that communication and expressing what you want and what you need is key.
Thank you for having me. I love talking to people about this stuff, and I don't do it as a profession, but I will do it as your friend if anyone wants to reach out.
All right. Well, that sounds good. So this episode of JustAliveTV.com is just about over. I did want to mention that if you want to be a co-host on the show, on the podcast, or you want to contribute to the blog, you are more than welcome to reach out to me, Melissa Krechler, at the website, on the Facebook page, the podcast, wherever you may be. Also, we are always up for and looking for sponsors to join our team to make this show bigger and better and help make people happier and healthier. So lots of love. Again, if you want a featured topic on the show, let me know, and I will do my best to try to find a co-host to join me on that featured topic. Lots of love. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you on the next episode.